It was terrible. I didn't know how much better things could be. Hey folks, welcome back to the Transplant Helper again today. My name is Jim Merle, and today we're talking about the ups and the downs of transplant. I've certainly been there, done that, and have the card to prove it. However, one thing that I'm always mindful of is what a tremendous blessing it is to be a heart transplant recipient. Now, I'll shorten my story up quite a bit by saying I was born with a congenital heart defect back in 1975. They didn't expect me to live, but because of a surgery that I had at only 6 months old, weighing only 9 pounds, I actually made it through the surgery and thrived as a child. Now, it wasn't a perfect life, but thrived as a child. Fast forward to about 32 years old, that's what I was, and I began to have some difficulties. I began to have some rhythm problems and different issues that came up, and kind of all those things were absolutely predicted by my team, so I knew that was coming up. I wasn't caught off guard, at least, by it. And so I made it on through that. Ultimately was evaluated for heart transplant 4 different times. It was finally on the 4th time the decision was made to list me. And so back in 2012-ish, I was listed for heart transplant as a status 1B. Now that's under the old system, but I was listed as a status 1B and ultimately moved up to a status 1A, put in the hospital permanently until transplant, and was transplanted back on May the 23rd, 2013. So that's the blessing within this. Now, from that day forward, I had what doctors even call themselves as one of the best recoveries they had seen in over 25 years. And so no doubt blessed with that as well. But I did learn shortly after my transplant, the doctors were well aware that I did have a problem with the aortic valve of my new heart. Now, they had made a decision on the night of transplant not to make a repair to that valve, but kind of waited out. And so I watched that carefully, at least my team did. I couldn't see it, but we watched that carefully for a number of years up until I was about 7 years out of transplant. They determined it was time to go ahead and replace that. So had that done by TAVR procedure, which was a wonderful procedure, beats the fire out of being opened up. And I had the TAVR procedure, recovered from that in a couple of days. No big deal. A few dizzy spells turned out to be medication related. Lippity split, and I was good. And then over the course of the last about 2.5 years or so, I began to have a little bit more difficulty. And I didn't realize it to begin with, but I have a little bit more difficulty. Was becoming quite a bit more fatigued, a little more winded in certain situations. If I was just doing general walking around, I seemed to have energy for everything. But if I tried to exert myself, even in the slightest, there would be a problem that would arise from that. And so I began to notice that just a little bit. But the doctors noticed 2 years ago on one of my routine heart caths. I still have annual heart caths. I don't have biopsies anymore. I do have annual heart cath and angiograms just to kind of check that aortic valve and some other things that kind of go all the way back to the congenital defect. But anyway, I was having annual heart checkup, if you will, including that cath, and they found about a 30% blockage at that point. Now, they told me about it, but they kind of blew it off as if it were no big deal. I did ask them at the time what that blockage was. I asked them, is that bacon grease? What is that? Is that a bad diet? Because I'm going to admit I don't eat the best always. I asked all those questions. They said, no, it's nothing to do with that. They said, you have something called CAV, and that's coronary allograft vasculopathy. I don't say that well. I got an entire video you can check out on that. You can see what that's about. But I have CAV, okay? That's not coronary artery disease, such as, again, you get plaque from eating cheeseburgers and stuff. I ate a lot of cheeseburgers, but it's not from that. This comes from CAV. It's just a part of transplants, a part of what happens to transplant recipients many times, more times than not, as a matter of fact. So I knew they needed to monitor that closely. And because I knew about CAV and knew what it was all involved in it, I know that disease, I'll call it a disease, is basically irreversible. There's nothing they can do to stop it. There are a few things they can do to slow the progression, a few medication changes. They put me through that. I didn't think much about it. I really had kind of formulated my own plan as to how I was going to stop CAV, and kind of behind closed doors, away from the doctor's eyes, started doing some things that I thought would help. And I believe it did to one point. But fast forward to my next annual, which was back in May of 2024. They repeated the cath and said, you're at a 50% blockage now. So I'd made a 20% increase over a year. Again, not too bad in that, but they said, we would like to check you out in 6 months. We don't feel comfortable waiting a year for that, so we'll check you out in 6 months, see how things go. I agreed to that. And so they told me then, well, we're going to send you over to and put you in the hospital instead of the caths that I usually have done over in the clinic area. It's a big collaboration over there, not a collaboration. Collaborating is not good. But I was sent over to the hospital, or at least ordered to go over to the hospital in November, which was just like last month now. It's December the 1st, as a matter of fact. But I was told to go over to the hospital, and I would be seen by an interventional cardiologist who would do a very thorough cath there, try to get a lot more information, and likely was going to stent me on that day. That's what I had heard. And so I go in for the procedure. I'll back up and talk about the procedure itself in a moment, but I go in for the procedure. They finish up, takes maybe 20 minutes, not bad. And I said, well, what did we do? What did we find? Did you stent me? No, we didn't stent you. I need to talk with your transplant team about it. Before I do, we'll probably bring you in and stent you next week. Well, I was pretty aggravated because I had been prepped. I had been through the whole procedure, and yet no stent. And so I was aggravated at that. Wasn't sure what was happening, but I went on about my business, came on home, whatever, and kind of waited it out. Well, when I didn't hear from anyone in the next day or two, I started touching base with my transplant team, with the interventional cardiology office, different groups, and asking, why are we not doing anything? Why are we waiting around? He had told me I had an 80% blockage at that point. So we went from 20 to 50 in a year, and then in only 6 months had gone from 50 to 80. Okay, so another 30% increase, more than 30% increase roughly. And so I kind of, you don't know what to do. I get to doing some digging, some researching, and find out that, hey, if this thing closes off a little more, heart attack city is what we have, massive heart attack coming on. So didn't want that at all. So I kind of got a little ginger about myself. I got a little bit careful. I got a little bit more cautious. I wasn't allowing myself to be exerted by any means. And I missed out on a good bit, even with my children, right immediately almost, because I didn't want to be involved in any strenuous type acts. For example, my son works out all the time. Sometimes all he really wants, he said, Dad, come in here and spot me. And that just means to help him make sure that he's safe in lifting those heavier weights. And I didn't want to do it, couldn't do it for that matter. And was still recovering from the cath that I had, by the way. I'll talk more about it in a moment, but that's what it was. And we'll fast forward another week. I got a little information as to what was going on. It seemed like that my interventional cardiologist, who was new to me, was arguing with my transplant cardiologist on whether or not I ought to be stented or not. And I didn't know why that was. Was it because it was too dangerous to stent? Was it because my team didn't feel like it would do enough good? There are various reasons that could have come up as to why maybe he wouldn't want me to be stented. But at that point, at least I was being told, we don't want to stent you. So I was kind of upset about that. So I go in to see my regular transplant team for a follow-up visit that just happened to be on the schedule there to get all my other stuff done, x-ray, blood work, x-ray, EKG, echocardiogram, all those things except for a cath, everything else to be done, and to see the doctor, which my doctor was out of town at the time. And so I saw one of the other team members, and I asked him, hey, what in the world is going on with this? Why am I being told on one hand I'm getting a cath and a stent this week? Should have been that week at the time. That week was waning fast. But why am I being told I'm going to be stented when I'm also being told the other doctors don't want to do it? Who's the problem here? More or less is what I was asking. So it was one of my transplant coordinators that started this for me. She went and checked things out. She come back and she said, well, the doctors here don't have a problem with you being stented. I said, well, I was told they did. So back and forth we went. Come up with the fact that what he wanted to do is to make a decision on whether to stent me pending that appointment I was involved in that moment, that day. So I said, fine, it is what it is. So I took it. And he went ahead and said, I will schedule you for the stent as quick as we can, but it's liable to be way on into December before we're able to get that done. But we'll write the note and give the approval for it, and the process can begin. So I was, again, frustrated because I'm thinking you got 80% blockage. It's increasing rather quickly or rapidly. And I've been sitting around here for over a week now just trying to find out what's going on. So for the first time, I was really frustrated with UAB Hospital and the whole transplant process. I've always had a wonderful experience with them in the past, but I was frustrated then because I just didn't want to go through all this. And I certainly didn't want to be left in limbo for what looked like was going to be about 5 to 6 weeks waiting on a stent at that point. Now, thankfully, that afternoon, I got home from the doctor that day. It was up in the air, and I got a phone call. Now, it was after 5 o'clock, so after office hours for anybody, but I got a phone call, and it was the interventional cardiologist office, and the lady on the other end said, "Hey, we need to schedule you for this stent. Need to get you in here." I said, "Okay, when can we do that?" I'm still thinking middle of December because that's what I've been told. She said, no, we'd like to see you on Tuesday. So I think that was a Friday to a Tuesday. And so there it was. I was scheduled now for a stent for an 80% blockage, going back into the hospital for this. Same day surgery, but in the hospital side of things. And I kind of went through the weekend like that. A little bit nervous, to be honest with you, not because I was afraid of a heart cath. I've had hundreds of caths, if you will, and angiograms, but I'd never been stented before. And there are some possible side effects to stents. You know, clotting is one of the major side effects. There's a possibility of stroke if there's a clot, bleeding, the typical issues. And then the fact that the stent, I knew by then I had mapped out from their notes where it was in my heart. I could see it was in kind of a difficult spot. It was kind of right in a Y of a certain artery, and it looked tough to me. It looked like I couldn't have done it. And so, you know, I just had to kind of go through the weekend a little bit anxious about it, to be honest with you, just a little bit worried about it. But went on Tuesday and was stented. And I was on the table about an hour and a half, best I can tell. I was behind closed doors with them for 2 hours, but about an hour and a half probably was on the table, wide awake, sedated, but wide awake. And they went ahead and stented me. And the crazy thing about my first radial cath, which had been the week and a half before, and the stent, which I don't know if you can see that little dot right there, if I can get it up close, that tiny little dot there, it's a bad angle, no matter which way I turn, but that tiny little dot right there, that's where they went in. They did a radial cath, went down my arm, up around the elbow, up through my shoulder, down into the heart, and did the stent. Same way they did the cath the week or so earlier, but they did a stent. And I can tell you what, this is my first experience with radial. I had always denied radial. I would say, hey, do the carotid, go through the neck, do the groin, go through the femoral artery. I'm fine with that, but don't touch my wrist. Not about that, because I knew that some people had a lot of difficulty with that wrist. I just didn't want to go radial. But this doctor really preferred that way, and given the situation of me having 2 caths in what amounted to about 10 days, going through the femoral artery or the groin would have been difficult, no question right there. It would have kind of took me down for a while, you know, not able to walk good and being very ginger. Of course, the possibility of bleeding down there is a lot higher than going through any other ways to get there. But because this was need to get on the left side, they had to go through either the femoral or the radial artery. So anyway, neither here nor there. But they go in and do that. And I'll tell you about my experience in the cath lab. They did give me some sedation. I had not Demerol. Trying to think. I just lost my word. Ativan. I had Ativan. That's to calm your nerves, which I didn't have a lot of nerves, but I appreciate the help. And I also had fentanyl. And, of course, it's very well controlled in a hospital environment, but they gave that to me. The week and a half before, when they'd done the cath, they didn't give me very much of that. And I was okay. I didn't hurt or anything, but it was pretty nerve-wracking. And so this time, I just told the nurse. Well, she was actually not a nurse. She was a nurse practitioner that was working with me, the sidekick to the main doctor. And I told her, she said, "Did you have any trouble with anesthesia?" I said, "Well, I didn't have any trouble, but I didn't get very much." She said, "That's crazy. Usually I drop the hammer on people." I said, "Well, you didn't do it to me last week." And we remembered each other. She said, "Well, I'll give it to you today." So I ended up getting 3 doses of that cocktail 3 different times, one at the beginning, during, and toward the end. Never did knock me out. Made me a little groggy, a little bit kind of out of it, to the point I know everything that happened. I heard every word, which I like to. I like to be able to see the screens. I watched it happen. But at the same time, it kind of time warped on me too. So I didn't go to sleep, at least as far as I can tell. But I time warped. And so that hour and a half seemed probably like 15 minutes. That's a blessing. But what I'm getting at is when they were doing the radial cath, for me, I would love to hear about your experience if you've done radials before. I felt that thing. Not pain, but I literally felt. I've never done it in my groin. I feel it at the site going in, but I've never done it in the groin. But I felt it go up my arm. I tracked it. And if I could have, you're kind of strapped to a table in a certain position. I think for me, this hand was down beside me. This right hand was down beside me. And then this one was kind of across my chest. They were working from this side. But I felt the catheters and all go in my arm. And if I could have, I would have been able to point and say, okay, here and here and here and here. And I could have told him when he crossed the elbow, when he went around the shoulder. I felt every bit of it. Now, it's just a strange feeling, not a painful feeling, but I did feel it all. And so I kind of was able to track it. I don't know if that was any more exciting or not. I'd love to hear if you've ever had that experience, if you've done radial. Love to hear about any issues or problems you had. And do you think you felt it? Because I really honestly believe I did. But anyway, they did it. It was a 100% success. They were able to put the stent right where they wanted to, open things up. So the 80% blockage is gone. And I tell you what, I popped up from that cath feeling great. Okay. I like to use this analogy that it's kind of like having an old lawnmower. If you've ever had an old lawnmower, we have riding mowers down here. We got over an acre or so to cut at times, but I have a riding lawnmower, and I had an old lawnmower for many, many years, old beat-up lawnmower. Thing was raggedy. I knew it was raggedy, but I kept pushing on. You know, they're expensive. I didn't want to have to go out and buy another one, so I pushed on. And then finally, after many, many years, I got a new lawnmower. The whole time thinking, well, my lawnmower's not that bad. It just I have some trouble cranking, have trouble keeping belts on it, you know, the typical. But when I got that new lawnmower, what I figured out is that old lawnmower I had was a hunk of junk. It was terrible. I didn't know how much better things could be. And so that's where I was. I had been telling the doctors for months, when they talk about this blockage, I'd say, oh, I'm not even symptomatic. You know, I don't have any problems, which I had a little bit of a problem. I was trying to ignore. And I wouldn't admit to being symptomatic because I didn't feel like I really was. You know, I wasn't swelling. I wasn't just collapsing. I wasn't having any angina or chest pain. The things they were asking me, I didn't have that. And so I said, I'm fine. Well, turns out after getting my lawnmower replaced, if you will, I had been having some trouble apparently, because when I wake up from the cath, or not wake up, but when I come to completely from the cath, I felt better immediately. Immediately I felt better. With this exception, again, I would love to hear your opinion. Both times I had the radial caths / cath stent, both times. The day of, fine, no problem. A little bit of pain at the site where they go in, a little soreness. But by the second day, oh man, it hurt. My hand turned a little bit blue. It was not the worst I've seen. A little bit blue, a little bit swollen, all to be expected. But what I didn't expect was a pain that was running right through that artery all the way up my arm. And I mean, it's like it pulsed through there, which it probably did. Every time the blood pumped or something, there was some irritation, I guess. It hurt, man, it hurt. And I had to ice my wrists all night and day for 3 days. Actually was putting ice up on my chest. It seemed like the worst spot was right here as it turned to go down in my heart. Not saying it was terrible. I've had worse. I've had femoral caths in my groin that were much worse, as far as, you know, having to deal with them over the course of days, get those knots and really sore and tender. Did not have that. But I did have both times, I did have that same about 3-day window of some pretty good pain, you know, where I was taking Tylenol every few hours. Actually, to be honest with you, I had some hydrocodone on standby. I took a hydrocodone one night, half of a hydrocodone one night to help me sleep. And I got through it. But it's like on that fourth day, for whatever reason, let's see, let me count that out. I had it Tuesday, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday. Woke up Friday morning, fine. Still tender. Don't touch me. Still tender even after these many days, but woke up fine. And so now I'm looking forward to the next step. See, the next step for me is that I'm going to begin cardiac rehab sometime this week. I'm waiting for them to call and get that scheduled. I'm not pushing for it, by the way. But I'm going to begin cardiac rehab this next week, and hopefully that's going to make a big difference. Because, again, like that broken down junky lawnmower analogy, I thought I was doing pretty good, but now that I feel a lot better already, and all they've done is pop a stent, I'm looking forward to, you know, getting back in shape, getting my legs back under me, maybe losing a few pounds. I don't know how well I'll feel in, say, 6 weeks of cardiac rehab, given the way I feel now. So I'm really excited about that, looking forward to it. And this is the thing about this that caught me off guard. Again, maybe you can attest to this if you've had stents or other kind of treatments along the way. I've never had rejection, never had infection. I've never had any problems really since transplant. So I've never felt this way I'm about to describe. But after transplant, I woke up feeling so much better than I did pre-transplant. That's obvious. That would be all of us. You've been in failure, in my case, and some of yours, heart failure. You wake up, you got a new heart, you're going to feel better. But that waking up, even though I did so well, that was still waking up, having had your chest split open, your body had been through extreme trauma, and it took a while. It was a process of healing, a slow, incremental process of healing. And so although I'm 1,000% appreciative of that, and I recognize how well I have done in the last 11 years in that process of healing, and I recognize about that year-long window it took to feel 100%, this was a lot more rewarding, to be honest with you, because this was not a process. This was, hey, lay on a table, they pop a stent, if you will. I wake up like that. I'm not awake again. I get up off the table like that. And suddenly I'm like, wow, I can already tell. And I can already tell when I get ready to walk out of this place, I'm running out of this place. This is better. And so feeling that almost immediate improvement, man, that was something else. And so that's just been my experience. And I didn't tell very many people about this. Again, I've been knowing about this about 2 years. I didn't tell very many people about this. Matter of fact, for a long time, the only human being in life that knew this aside from my doctors was my wife. I didn't tell my mama. She'll probably watch this. I'm sorry, mama, but I didn't tell you. I didn't tell my brother, my sister, my children. I didn't tell anybody because, one, I was hoping to slow the progression of that and keep it at bay. And I was also just kind of trying to ignore it, to be honest with you. And I didn't see worrying people at the time. This is something I knew would happen. I know that CAV is a part of long-term heart transplant recipient survival. It is. And it's just going to happen. It's actually what takes down most heart transplant recipients eventually. Now, I don't mean take them out. I mean, that's why people have to have their second transplants a lot of times, because CAV takes over and it progresses so quickly till it hardens the arteries and closes them up, and they have to transplant them again. I don't expect that in the next while. Could be out there in the future, but I don't expect that in the next while. But I just didn't want to talk about it really. So I didn't share it on here. Didn't share it with anybody in my family except for my wife. Had to tell her. I would have got caught if I hadn't. Yeah. So I thought I'd sit down and talk about it a little bit. So overall, just again to summarize everything, kind of started out with a difficult life. Things pepped up. Got a transplant 11 years ago plus now. And just a couple bumps in the road. The aortic valve replacement, no big deal. And then this stent. Wow. I'm excited about it, really. And I'm looking forward to even what I'll be able to do today, I'll have to get out and about and run some errands. I'm excited about the energy I'm going to have today that I may not have had in the past. So I'm just thrilled about that. So as far as talking to you about the ups and downs, that was kind of the title of the video. I just told you I've had some ups and downs. I've had another really, really down that I'm not even going to talk about on this video. But seemingly I've gotten over that hump as well. It was not cardiac related at all. Just kind of one of those scary things that you get into. I will talk about another day. But as far as ups and downs, my thing is that I always tell people, I try to tell myself in the mirror, to appreciate the down times, because it's during those down times when the up times are so much better. In order to experience the mountaintops, you have to have a valley in between. And you don't realize how high and beautiful the mountaintops are on either side unless there's a valley in between. So I'm thankful for the downs. I'm thankful for the valleys. I'm thankful for the times when things don't go perfectly, because transplant doesn't. I've had the argument before, and I still stand beside this phrase personally. Okay, for me, I do. I say transplant is a treatment, not a cure. Now, some people argue that and say, oh, no, because I had this disease or that disease, and when I was transplanted, I got rid of that disease. Yeah, okay, I did too. I mean, I'm not a transposition of the great artery or vessel patient anymore, because that heart that had that problem, defective at birth, gone. It's not in me anymore. But at the same time, I know that transplant comes with challenges, okay? It comes with difficulties. It comes with ups and downs. It comes with good days and bad days. And I'm willing to take those. And I'm willing to see every day as a day, okay? That's another phrase I use. Every day is a day, okay? So whether it's a low day or a high day, it's a day. And it's a day that you're experiencing and that you're being given as an opportunity. And so my advice to you is to live every day to its fullest, okay? Just be thankful for every single breath that you take in life and live every day into its fullest. And be willing to share with others. That's what I'm trying to do here. That everything is not always easy, okay? It's not always easy, but it's always good. It's possible to think that way. Not always easy, but it's always good. And so I'm thankful for the experiences I've had in the last 2 years, basically, this whole process, and especially in the last week. Wow. Who knew? Who knew that my lawnmower was so broken that getting that little bitty, I mean, that stent, I don't even have anything here. This stent right here that I got put in is smaller than I call it the butt of that pin right there. It's smaller than that because it went in a little bitty artery. But look how much better I feel already. So we'll see what the future holds, and I look forward to being with you on another day. But thank you so much for joining me today. I would specifically love to hear about your experiences. If you had radial caths, do you have any pain with it? Overall, I'm not a fan, but it sure worked okay. You just have to know what's coming. You have to know you're going to have a sore wrist and maybe a sore arm for several days, about 4 days for me, twice, but we'll see. I'd love to hear about that. I'd love to hear about your other experiences, folks. When you write in the comments about your difficulties, and especially if you'll write about the bounce backs, it's the bounce backs, it's the standing back ups that encourage people so much. If we paint our life as transplant patients being all a bed of roses and perfect, sometimes people, when their bed of roses is wilted, they get frustrated. But they need to know there are ups and downs. And for my life, there has been. I expect many more of those, to be honest with you. But I'm going to take them as they come. I'm going to enjoy them as I can, and I'm going to see the blessing that I have. Thank you so much for joining me today. And until next time, please stay stronger, my friends.